G'day friends, it's your tech bro here with his first ever YouTube video. So be nice. No, seriously, give me some pointers. I'm an absolute noob. Today, I'm going to be comparing the best low light settings and night footage on the DJI Osmo 360. I took the Osmo 360 to the incredible Lightscape Festival last month in Melbourne, Australia. This was such a perfect spot to give the camera an ultimate low light test. There was so many amazing light installations with vibrant colors and cool reflections. I definitely recommend checking it out in winter if you're ever down in old Melbourne. Straight off the bat, the best way to find the optimal settings on the DJI Osmo 360, or any action camera for that matter, is to shoot in manual and compare the individual shutter speeds and ISO ranges one by one. And so that's basically what I did. All the footage was shot in 8K 25 FPS in the panoramic 360 mode, which I then exported into a standard 4K 16:9 video through the DJI Studio app. I will mention, when I exported it, I enabled noise reduction in order to hopefully get the best quality. But yeah, if you disable that, your mileage may vary, I'm not too sure. I haven't compared that yet to see if there's a major difference there in noise reduction. But of course, to save this video from getting any longer, let's get started with the footage. Starting off, the footage you are seeing was shot in the Osmo 360's stock Super Night mode. I didn't touch any exposure, shutter speed, or ISO here, and the color can only reach the normal 10-bit in this mode. Now, keep in mind, DJI's stabilization is called Rocksteady, and this was turned on by default. So you may notice how the various settings I compare impact this sort of smeariness or blur-like effect we can see on this sign, for instance. Overall, to me, in this mode, the light and colors looked really great considering how dark it was. However, as the auto shutter speed is hitting around 1/25th of a second, the Rocksteady image stabilization is showing some very distracting smear-like artifacts, which I'm personally not a huge fan of. Moving on, next, the only change here I made was locking the shutter speed to 1/25th of a second, and this was with the goal to maximize how much light entered into the sensor during motion. So again, the colors and light looked great here, but due to the low shutter speed, the stabilization caused that sort of smearing effect. Next, I locked the shutter speed to 1/50th of a second. This was the only adjustment as I wanted to see how well the stabilization could improve while moving in Super Night mode. While there is a little more light lost here, I noticed a very minor improvement to stabilization, though I feel this could improve if we raise the shutter speed further. Now I've raised the shutter speed to 1/100th of a second. I think now we're seeing a better increase in stabilization, and to be honest, if you're vlogging while walking or moving in a vehicle of some sort, I would probably recommend keeping the shutter speed in Super Night mode to a minimum of 1/100th of a second. Now here it is quite dark as I set the minimum shutter speed to 1/200th of a second. Though again, the stabilization has improved greatly, I think. Now I will mention this was a very dark section during the walk. However, it should still ideally be capturing a little more detail in the path and trees surrounding the lights. Okay, now moving away from Super Night mode, we get some more interesting results. Here I set the Osmo 360 to its default auto settings, normal 10-bit color, auto shutter, auto ISO, with the only change being the exposure set to -0.3. Now, that exposure change shouldn't have a huge effect, but after recording this video, I sort of realized that if you're shooting low light, you should probably want to keep the exposure set to 0 in this mode. In this mode, it looks fairly dark and not too usable compared to Super Night mode. Next, I left all the previous settings as default, but changed the color profile to D-Log M. Now, this shocked me really, as immediately all the deep blacks and shadows lifted, while the exposure on the lights actually looked much better. Though of course, the stabilization struggled a tad. D-Log M probably looks much better as there's a higher dynamic range of colors involved in this color profile. Next, I started to fiddle with manual shutter speed as well as manual ISO. The previous tech bro at the time didn't quite understand ISO, so it was important for me to compare these so I could get an idea on the best quality. Here we are looking at 1/25th shutter speed and 800 ISO, which of course led to a very dark image. Next, I thought I would raise the shutter speed to double that of the frame rate, 1/50th of a second. This in turn should help stabilization, but of course the image was still far too dark. Now, this next shot shocked me the most. The only change here was setting the color profile to D-Log M. And wow, what a difference. Here we are at 1/50th of a second shutter speed with 800 ISO. This footage was very accurate to the darkness during the section, and so it was amazing to see less noise by the lower ISO, while also allowing more light in thanks to the higher dynamic range in D-Log-M. Next, we're looking at the same settings as before, but this time with the ISO at 1600, which I've heard is really the upper limit you want to keep your ISO from going over if you want more professional looking footage. Otherwise, it gets a little bit too grainy and a bit too noisy. Once again, D-Log-M seems to cut through really well at lifting those blacks while keeping the colors prominent. This is without any color grading, by the way. Here's another comparison to D-Log-M. We've got 1/50th of a second, 3200 ISO in normal 10-bit. You would think that an ISO of this range would bring in a brighter image, but I noticed the Osmo 360 still struggles at this color profile, especially in low light. Now I've turned D-Log-M on with the exact same settings, and wow, again, what a difference. Now I am no color grading expert, but this footage already looks more superior than the previous one to me. Notice how there is so much more color in the pathway and even the water reflections in the distance. Next, I set the shutter speed to 1/100th of a second, which is, in my opinion, as I said before, the minimum you should aim for when walking or moving in low light with this camera. ISO set to 1600, D-Log-M, and the stabilization is much clearer now with the higher shutter speed, with far less jittery, smeary artifacts around the light sources. So this setting really felt like the optimum for the Osmo 360. As a final test, I cranked the shutter speed to 1/200th of a second, kept the ISO on auto, though it can max out at 6400, and D-Log-M as the color profile. Here, the stabilization felt like not too much of a difference compared to the 1/100th of a second, and that's probably because there's a bit more light in the shot compared to the other ones. But the stabilization is still quite strong considering a low light environment. Overall, the Osmo 360 performed pretty well in my low light test, but if I'm shooting in these conditions again, I definitely feel D-Log-M is essential to bring up those deep blacks and shadows. Let me know how you felt the Osmo 360 looked to you. And of course, if you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, drop them in the comments below. Go nuts, this is my first YouTube video, so I will get back to them all, no worries. If this was helpful, I would love it if you could like the video and hit subscribe, as I currently have 0 subscribers and 0 likes from the time of uploading, so it would be pretty ideal to get at least 1 subscriber. Just 1, no more than 1 though. Cheers all.